Hi, my name's Lynsey. I head up the experience design practice at our Edinburgh club, Grace. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the return on investment of user experience and design, a talk that I did at UX Scotland recently. A little bit more about me. I've originally got a background in product design, a Bachelor of Science graduate from Duncan of Durnston College of Art and Design, and then through that found the world of user experience and currently work for, as I said, And Digital, who strive to bridge the gap of digital skills within the companies that we work for. I'm also part of Creative Equals, who strive to bring equity in creative industries. I've been in the industry for around about a decade now, and I've had the pleasure of designing experiences across the globe for multiple clients, helping to build teams and justify investment from internal stakeholders to help build those teams, as well as having been in IT consultancies that were near to the world of user experience and also help clients with their user experience design maturity or helping to design their products and services. I feel very grateful to be part of this industry and have had the opportunity to speak at UX Scotland on today's topic. However, I have to say I'm not an expert. We're all still learning in the digital industry, but hope that this talk can help leave you with some of the tools to help justify the return of investment that you can see from user experience. What we're also going to do in this is it's going to be sort of gently interactive. I'm going to be peppering throughout this talk some industry stats for you to keep in your back pocket that, depending on what background you're from, so if you're a designer and sometimes feel the need that you've got to justify the return of investment of user experience, or say you're a stakeholder and you need to be justified about what the value is of user experience, then hopefully what I'm going to share with you will help to convince. We're going to make it a bit of a game in that sense. So the first question I have for you is, have you ever had to justify the value or the return on investment of user experience design? Have a little think about that just now. Yes, you have, or no, you have not. Hopefully, the reason that you're here is more than the yes, you have, and you would like some help. And that is what we aim to do in this talk. So I'm going to help you justify what the return on investment really is for user experience. If you're like myself and you are a UX professional, we often see value in improving product and service experiences and thinking in the mindset of our end users or customers. However, not everyone always sees it this way. And sometimes those that don't see it that way are the ones that you have to convince to get your funding. As designers as well, if you're like myself, you may have a degree or a background that actually lacks that business understanding, but the need to be commercially aware is ever increasing. People sometimes don't understand why design is needed and how you can break through, and it can be a little bit demoralizing. You just want to design and do the best thing that you possibly can, help to create the right change in the products or services that or experiences that you're designing. However, someone once told me before, you know what, Lynsey, everyone has to be a bit of a salesperson. And do you know what? There is a bit of truth in that. Everyone has to provide their buyer with confidence that they can do their role. So say a doctor to a patient, a PT to a gym goer, you seek confidence in others when it comes to finding out if your time or money is worth it. So it's the same on user experience. How can we provide that confidence, or as others say, value or return of investment? Now, a constant challenge, ever more poignant, as companies are going through major cuts and are really, truly focused on the bottom line with the cost of living crisis. And I truly believe that we can help industries make monstrous savings through creating streamlined customer experiences and digital solutions that help to generate operational efficiencies. If you consider yourself, say, a stakeholder or a budget holder, you'll be having these kind of conversations constantly and probably thinking, do you know what, UX designers are not cheap. Where is my value? And how can I steer the right discussion with my board members to help them understand that value? Or as UX designers, we often don't have the tools in our kit bag to help articulate the return of investment. Therefore, I thought this topic was worth discussing, and did do at UX Scotland from both sides of the coin. So just quickly, going to chat about what the return on investment is and the fact that that can mean something different to different people. So more often than not, it comes down to the bottom line, the pennies and the pounds. However, it can mean values and savings in other things, like saving energy, creating delight, other things that affect where profits are made. So this is a nice handy diagram that's pulled together, because for me it is actually threefold. So number one that we've got on there is a category that I've named customer delight. It is a category name, there's more to it, and we know that in user experience. It's about building relationships with your users, it's increasing customer satisfaction, it's removing barriers and increasing inclusion to the products that you're designing. Yes, delighting your users and therefore retaining them more, or increasing adoption, or just making life easier for that end user. As a result of that, we also consider what's going on behind the scenes more, or we can do. So reducing operational costs, increasing efficiencies in things like reducing customer complaints or customer service needs, making processes a lot more efficient through, say, things like rapid prototyping to quickly test and validate ideas, and helping to shape how employees use technology. So these three things, also help to amount to growing revenue in an organization or in a product or a service. So making sure that we continue that narrative and what it is that we're doing to help delight the customer, how does that also help with the bottom line? Why should experience design teams be versed in talking about that value in their work? Well, it also makes sure that we focus work in the right places, and that's something that we always look to do in the work that we're doing within Grace. And using this narrative, make sure that we get that right balance of being able to, yes, create customer delight first of all and think about those needs firsthand, but also pinpoint the moments where we're going to create efficiencies and therefore help grow revenue in the bottom line. However, taking that lesson on, you do have to approach it with caution. I've got a few examples, but and they're drawn down the line of what I sometimes call the big data fetish. So that's when people cling on to really tangible statistics or major KPIs and drive in that direction to try and hit that KPI. However, you've got to be really careful that this doesn't have an adverse outcome. So a great example of that is with Uber. So they recently faced some criticism about a really aggressive rider and driver acquisition target. So this led to incidents where background checks and safety protocols were compromised in the rush to onboard drivers quickly. So the designers and the developers within Uber created an experience that made this a really seamless process. However, it created a highly competitive and hostile environment between drivers, impacting the earning and also impacting overall satisfaction. So it's getting that balance right. Another interesting example is with Wells Fargo. You'll see here in this newspaper headline that the team there were given a heavy goal of creating as many accounts as they possibly could for their customers. This actually led to the customer teams creating fraudulent accounts, which also then led to unhappy customers and a huge bill at the end of it, due to the scandal and the result of this. And then last example, one that we've probably all seen in some form of means is this, what I like to call the manipulinks targeting. When you are on a website, how often do you happen to see something like this? Don't do this with your customers. This is bullying users into signing up to a newsletter and making customers feel guilty about doing so. This often results in, yes, a larger increase in people subscribing, maybe, but actually when it comes to the quality of the customers and the people that you really want that will be long-term lovers of your brand, it's probably going to be quite slim. So they're reaching that KPI and target that maybe the customer experience team have been assigned with getting as many subscribers as you possibly can to the 14 simple dinners for one. However, are these the kind of users that you actually want? So this is demonstrating some of those dark, bad patterns that can happen in usability because of a strong driving KPI. So we really have to think about the balance across that wheel that I showed, making sure that what we're doing really is the best for the customer experience, looking at that business goal and thinking about the bigger picture when we do that. A few common arguments that we sometimes hear against UX design investment is what I'd like to share now as well, and helping you to sort of counter those arguments. One that we hear quite often is, do you know what? People will understand it in training. Let's fix it then. And, you know, it is true. Humans are adaptable and we can train them to use a piece of software. And it may be the case in enterprise software. However, in the real world, there is employee turnover who will never get to that training course, and the cost of training is the cost of bad usability. It should be possible to cut that training budget if you create a highly usable self-serve experience, saving you time and money in the end. And next one, everyone is a UXer. Everyone needs to care about the user experience. However, if it's not one person's core responsibility and specialism, then it often ends up being nobody's. So holding individuals accountable to the user experience can create the best user experience we possibly can. It takes a specialist to look at things like running the right usability studies, doing the analysis and creating the right design improvements off the back of that. Inviting stakeholders in is a great way of gaining that buy-in and understanding of what it takes in that realm. And that's the job of a dedicated UX professional, to bring everyone on board with that learning and understanding. Third argument, analytics is God. Analytics will tell you the what, but it won't tell you the why. How many of us have heard things along the lines of, well, just run an A/B test and wait for the big results of that to make our decisions. Yes, analytics is a useful data source that, you know, when you run that A/B test, the B test may qualify the work. However, how did you get to that A/B test? And where do you go from there? So there's a bit of user experience work that has to go in there, but you also need to think wider than just individual features, and on that basis, you need to look across the full user experience, consider that big picture design questions that come into the end-to-end to fuel the right design improvements. The last one I've got in here, and a very dangerous one, is we already know what the user wants. We don't need user experience. We all know what happens when you make assumptions and what that results in. You are not the user. So what can you, or how can you know what they actually want? And user needs also change over time so much, and you need to make sure that you keep up with that and keep up with the competition. So from some common UX arguments, I'd love to show also some industry examples of what the result has been from great user experience work. One of those examples is leading towards a question for you. How much did the UK government digital service save when redesigning the user experience of online government services? Was it 32 billion or 4.1 billion? It was 4.1 billion. So it just shows the growth that can be brought into light with using some design resources. So this was all achieved by simplifying processes, improving efficiency, and reducing that need for in-person and paper-based transactions. Next one is, what percentage reduction in support tickets did General Assembly report with the help of UX design? Is it 45% or 90%? It's actually 90%. So that 90% reduction in user support tickets is just one of the amazing metrics and claims of success that they've got. But they also had a 200% increase in user retention after implementing those UX design improvements. And if you'd like to see any of the information or resources as to how they've measured these, it's in my appendix, and it's from the majority of Nielsen Norman Group's reports and studies where this comes from. So what more can you do to justify the value of user experience? One of the ways in which I feel is really powerful also is not just using data and stats from industries or fueling discussions with being able to ensure that you have ways in you justifying those arguments. It's through storytelling. Another question to you is, what percentage of people recall a story? 63 or 41? It's 63. What percentage of people recall a statistic? 45 or 5? It's 5. Can you comfortably remember or retell some of the stats that I shared earlier? Or how many of you will remember the Uber or the Wells Fargo case study or the Manipulinks instead? That just shows it's getting the right balance of, data as well as story. And the reason there's a brain on the screen is there is a bit of sort of science to it. We know that every sort of part of your brain works together in tandem. But if we look at the limbic and the cortex, this helps to pull out where you find that balance between the emotive with the data. So in your limbic system, this is where you draw emotions, where you consider that storytelling. It's where that behavior comes from decision making and hitting that action. And in your cortex, there's more around language, words, numbers, the articulation. So getting that right balance is key. Don't just take it from me. It's the way that we're all built. So science. So what I like to say is start with the soul and end with the sale. I'm joking, but there is an element of truth when it comes to talking about or helping to sell in what the value is of user experience. If you're getting the right balance of delighting the customer, improving efficiency and growing revenue, then it should be straightforward. But communication overall is really key. So compelling storytelling, if you're passionate about it, then it will infiltrate with your audience and it will elicit that emotion and buy-in. So for example, how can you convince stakeholders to build, say, a design system? For those of you that haven't experienced what a design system is, it can take a lot of time when it comes to creating it up front. However, it supports the build of a library of reusable components, code, style guides, and a UI toolkit, saving designers and developers time in the long run. You have to keep it really simple though. So don't boil the ocean, keep it tangible. It will often be a bit of an indirect argument, and that's okay. It can be difficult to make that direct revenue connection. However, breaking it down into really manageable chunks and considering that emotive pitch that I talked about earlier, it's more than just revenue and numbers. So thinking about that magic 3 in the wheel and that weighting there between customer delight, internal efficiencies and revenue, here's a nice little mode from Nielsen Norman Group that shows how to pick that right balance. So considering you want to speak to your stakeholders about delivering a design system or getting that buy-in, a way in which you can look at that is, say you were to pick one component and look at that one component, whether it be a drop-down menu, a video plugin, look across your current user experience or your perceived user experience. How many times does it get repeated on there? In my example, I've said 5. 5 times it appears across the user journey. Then Consider or speak with your teams about how much time it takes to create that one component, or how many redesigns have been completed previously, and estimate that time between the two. So I've said here, 6 redesigns have been done previously, and it takes 10 hours, say, to create that component. That results in a 60-hour revenue opportunity, which is the cost of the design and development, and that's just for one component. So think about what impact you could have across the full gamut of the design system. What's great about this and sharing this little tangible way of demonstrating the investment and the value behind it is that it takes very little work to prove this case. What you could have done is you could have performed it for lots and lots of different components. You could have tried to figure out the average pay of the development team, and spend only as much time as you need to get that point across to leadership, and tailor the story to the audience that you're speaking to demonstrate your point. So this can also help with leading towards the business goal of, say, increasing employee efficiency, as an example. The next one is user research, and how can you help with, again, identifying and sharing what the return on investment is of conducting user research. First, consider the story behind it. So what questions can you not answer about your users that you need to? And if you unlock that insight, what value could you be bringing? What design work could you then justify? So again, feeding back to that wheel between customer delight, internal efficiencies, and revenue growth, here's one that I've mocked up to help demonstrate this. So say you were to conduct one usability session. So that's 5 tests when it comes to the magic number that Nielsen Norman Group always talks to as well. It would take 2 researchers and, say, in a dream, 3 days to conduct. However, when you do so, you can detect 85% of design problems before going live. So think about the amount of risk that this is going to reduce. Think about the business goal of helping to increase customer lifetime value because you've identified some of the pain points upfront. And comparing the investment of those 3 days, what could you uncover or avoid versus launching without doing that? What customer queries or challenges could that have resulted in? So telling that story can help with that. And then lastly, say adding an additional member to your design team. So the questions to consider here when it comes to the storytelling on this is, what are you not achieving that you could have done with that additional member? What could you create if you had someone else? Back to our wheel, considering those aspects. And this is a really great example of how to have that discussion. So Nielsen Norman looked across a large number of projects and pulled together this study. And what they found was that 11% was the average size of a project team devoted to user experience. It's an average, so some more, some less, but 11% is kind of the average size of the UX department, if you like, within a project team. And then 75% was the average improvement towards business and user goals after designing for usability. So 75% is the improvement outcome. So basically what this is saying is, if you spend 11% of your development budget on user experience, what you could gain is a 75% improvement on the outcome. So it shows here that the average return on investment is incredibly high. So the goal that could come to this is helping to increase the profitability of your teams. So I hope those examples really help in bringing you towards telling that story of what the ROI is of user experience. But a few points to help summarize. As practitioners, we care and know how to create the right solutions, and we look at those UX intricacies, but we need to be able to share the wider business goals that we can achieve. And bear in mind that great design is great business, so teaching that languages within teams can do no harm. Communication is key, So that compelling storytelling, if you're passionate about it, it will infiltrate with your audiences. So it elicits that emotion and that buy-in. Share your reasons with the right balance of data and story. And lastly, don't overthink it. Like, don't put numbers across the entire experience. Choose a subset and demonstrate that. Tie it back to business goals and KPIs that you know that you have, and balance with that with where you are bringing value on the user experience. Keep it small and keep it tangible. So my last question for you to think about is, do you feel empowered to have that conversation within your organization about the return of investment of user experience? Thank you so much. And please do not hesitate to get in touch if you have any more questions.